so when one looks back upon one's conduct and sees that one is acting in ways that are beneficial to oneself, beneficial to one others, this gives a kind of clarity of mind, a kind of ease of mind, and that becomes a means for generating joy. Another way to generate joy is to go back and contemplate the objects of refuge, or the three jewels. You know, often when we teach meditation in the West, we begin by explaining meditation practices like mindfulness of breathing, observation of the rise and fall of the abdomen, contemplation of sensations in the body. And of course, this is all very useful, very beneficial. But when one gains some strong confidence and saddha in the triple gem, then a useful meditation practice, at least to do, say, to supplement your regular practice for about 10 minutes each day, is to do Buddhanusati, the contemplation of the qualities of the Buddha. And you find that as you practice this, it brings strong joy and delight into the mind. Now, usually we, in the canonical formula, mentions 9 qualities of the Buddha, but it's not necessary to try to practice all 9 of them. What I found the most useful way to handle this meditation practice is just to select 3 qualities, the 3 that we mention when we do the homage to the Buddha. We have Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa, but I take them in the order Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava. And each of these 3 qualities of the Buddha represents a particular virtue of the Buddha. So we take the designation Arahang, the worthy one or the holy one. This indicates or signifies the Buddha's complete purity of mind, that he's an Arahang, a holy one, a worthy one, because he's eradicated all the defilements from the mind. Okay, then Sama Sambuddho, perfectly enlightened one. This indicates the perfect wisdom of the Buddha, that he is one who has fully comprehended all the truths of the Dhamma and has taught them in the most appropriate ways. Then Bhagava, which we translate rather unsatisfactorily, the Blessed One or the Exalted One, to my mind, I see this as pointing to the great compassion of the Buddha, that the Buddha, out of compassion, has resolved to live on in the world and to teach the Dhamma extensively to others. And so we can just let the mind settle on these 3 qualities. Arahang, the perfectly purified and liberated one. The Sama Sambuddho, the perfectly enlightened one, the one of boundless wisdom. And Bhagava, the one of great compassion. And as one practices in this way, you find that it brings a strong upsurge of joy. And so from this you could see, just from these little remarks, that joy becomes a strong supporting factor for the unfolding of all the other factors or stages in the Buddha's path. When joy arises, as joy becomes solidified and elevated, it turns into piti, delight. And when delight settles down, it turns into sukha, happiness, a kind of stable happiness. And when the mind is happy, then arises samadhi. People think that samadhi is what we translate concentration. And so it's commonly thought that the way to gain samadhi is just to fix the mind on the object, to force the mind on the object. Let me be aware of the breath, in breath, in breath, out breath. Oh, but the mind is wandering and wandering, or it's excited, agitated, or dull and drowsy. This is happening because one lacks that support of joy, delight, and happiness. And so to facilitate the attainment of samadhi, it's very useful to strengthen those factors that lead to joy. And this is done not only in the meditation practice, but in many other ways in our day-to-day life. I mentioned the observance of the silas, the precepts. The practice of generosity also contributes to joy. Because when we give to others, in fact, when the Buddha lays out, one of the ways in which the Buddha lays out the practice is dana, sila, bhavana, that is giving, morality or precepts, and meditation. So the supports in this formula, the supports for meditation are generosity and moral conduct. So when we give to others, we break down the barriers that normally we establish between ourselves and others. And when we're able to give generously to others, again, when we reflect back on that generosity, not to bolster our ego and think, oh, how great I am that I give to others, but we reflect on the generosity and we see that this is freeing us from the attachment to things that we take to be mine, and establishing a sense of rapport, solidarity, and even identification with others. And so this is expanding the range of the mind to embrace others, and that becomes a source of joy. And so when we have generosity, the moral discipline, faith expressed in reverence and veneration for the triple gem, then these are going to strengthen joy, and joy will lead eventually to samadhi, to insight, and to liberation. So these are a few words from from one who has just spent 6 hours in a plane traveling from California to JFK. Okay, anyway, if there's any questions, then please feel, or any points or comments that anybody wants to make. Sometimes I think when nobody has any questions, I think maybe I gave a really boring talk.
The original discourse that inspired this talk was in the Samhita,
It's Nidana. It's the this is the connected discourses on dependent arising. It's chapter 12. And this discourse is number 23. It's called the Upanisa Sutta. I think translated like decisive support or supporting conditions. Because after going from ignorance through to dukkha, then it says that dukkha or suffering is the supporting condition for faith. Faith is the supporting condition for pamoja, for joy. Joy is the supporting condition for rapture or delight. Then delight is a supporting condition for tranquility, tranquility for happiness, happiness for samadhi, samadhi for insight, and then it goes through some other factors to liberation and the knowledge of liberation. Yeah, so that's chapter 12, Sutta 23. And then the other one that I referred to, where instead of having faith leading to joy, it has the silas or the precepts, non-remorse, freedom from remorse, and then joy, and then it follows with the same sequence. This occurs in the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Tens. I think it's like Sutta number 3 or 4 in the Book of Tens. Excuse me?
Which one is more accurate?
Of those two suttas? It's not a question of one being more accurate than the other. It's just that they are presenting a similar sequence, though a little different at the beginning, and from two different points of view. The one from the Samyutta Nikaya is connecting the sequence with the usual formula of dependent origination. So the way I see it, that the sequence of dependent origination is like a cycle, a vicious circle, where ignorance leads around to old age and death, and then if one doesn't enter upon the path, then one just goes from old age and death to more ignorance. One goes from old age and death to a new birth with more ignorance, leading again to old age and death, then new birth, more ignorance, again to old age and death. But the place where that circle is broken is when, in response to suffering, faith arises, faith in the triple gem, and then one, through faith, one enters the path, and then one goes through the sequence of factors. Whereas the one from the Anguttara Nikaya, it seems, first it's not connected to the series of dependent arising, and it already seems to presuppose faith, but it starts off with the virtuous conduct based on the precepts, and then non-remorse, and then it enters into that same sequence. So it seems to be starting with somebody who's already taken up the practice, and now is going through the stages of the practice.